You know, it's a crazy year when the outlook on St. Louis is more positive than the stock market. You're going to see a little bit of that today. My name is Jason Hall, the CEO of Greater St. Louis, Inc., which is a relatively new civic institution in St. Louis, focused on what I think is the defining issue of this decade for this region. We have got to grow. In the business community, families and others that are committed to a long-term vision about where St. Louis fits into a broader global economy and relevance are coming together in unprecedented ways to make that happen. And I'm going to share a little bit about that here today. I stand here and I am able to do this because those business leaders that are civic-minded and civically committed allow me to do that and pull their resources together to empower that. We're going to jump in here a little bit. Let me take up altitude. You know, we've talked a little bit about macro conditions. The world is getting hit with a dizzying array of forces right now. And as I've explained to a lot of our investors, what's really happening, the world is leaving the post-World War II era and we are entering a new one. You had a large global event like the pandemic, the detangling around supply lines from China, the rise and the conflict with Russia and Ukraine and the set of forces that set off. There's just a lot going on. We're getting hit with a lot in a very short period of time. But it's in that disruption that the pecking order of cities actually does get reshuffled. If you think of it in business terms, when everybody else is thrown back on their heels, that's when you got to go grab market share. And that's exactly the mindset that we're bringing to the table now for St. Louis. We will not get an opportunity like this again in the disruption to be able to move this region forward and truly make some leapfrog moves. And I shared yesterday, I was on the phone with my peer from San Francisco a few weeks ago, and I said, you know, for 20 years of my adult life, everybody wanted to be the Silicon Valley of something, right? It was sort of this defining term. And I'm on the phone with him, he's like, oh my God, it is so depressing out here. People are leaving our city, crime is everywhere, we got vacant buildings downtown, homelessness, drug use, it's just horrible. And I thought, oh my gosh, welcome to what it's like to have been in the Midwest and the rise of globalization and the need to transform our economies. But I think that should hit home. When cities that really hit it the last couple of decades are that thrown on their heels, that's when we've got to be very organized, keep our region focused, and come out on the other side of this exceptionally strong. It is really the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And what that takes, we don't need to make it more complex than it is. Some group has got to be the organizing principle for how you shape your economy. There needs to be a central switchboard, there needs to be an actual agenda, there's got to be a way for people to work and collaborate to get things done, and you got to think long-term. That has proven very, very difficult in this region, but that now, fortunately, has been solved for. And I want to hit this on a macro, because sometimes, and a lot of folks in this room, we've seen the ups and downs, but a couple of things just to highlight, I think, the advantages that this region has and that we're starting to hit coming out of this COVID. Here from CNBC reporting, certainly a reliable and authoritative business source. St. Louis #1 for new college grads in the country. In the country, folks. I think that is amazing. Yeah, feel free to do that. And this is one where one of our real advantages we have is our relative affordability and then the amazing cultural and other amenities that we have built here. Affordability's back in. That's what happened to a lot of young people. They were priced out of these big cities. They simply couldn't afford it. And that is a big driving decision now for location. The other one is just our rise in tech. And this is a big deal. We got walloped with the deindustrialization around manufacturing and had to transform our economies, not just St. Louis, but other big Midwest cities. From the Brookings Institution, which is one of the most authoritative and leading institutes, actually founded and funded by a successful St. Louis business person, Robert Brookings. It's based in DC, and they said, look, we know the big tech superstars like San Francisco and Boston and New York, but really, who's that next group of cities that's got a fast-growing tech sector and can really rise and go to the next level? And so proud that St. Louis is on that list by the numbers, folks. One of the fastest growing in this cohort, actually. And I think sometimes our confidence gets so shaken because of everything we've been through. We don't think of ourselves as being in that same cohort as a San Diego or a Dallas or a Miami. But the reality is that's where we're at, and that's a strength. And with the digital transformation that was also accelerated by COVID and some of these other global forces, this is a strong advantage for us to lean into. And you're going to see that showing up in some of the work that we're getting done. So that's to kind of level set the big picture so that we can now take it down to St. Louis. I'm going to hit 3 topics here. Why was Greater St. Louis Inc. formed? How are we working to produce new results? Was this just tying 5 or 6 organizations together and nothing really changed? Let's talk about points on the board. And then I really do want to give you an insight into what's happening next. What are we working on and what you're going to be reading about in the papers in the years ahead here. So let's first focus on Greater St. Louis Inc. We are not even 24 months old yet. This was a historic 5-way civic merger. We closed on December 31st at midnight on 2020 and then launched operations January 1st. We brought together, and I'll hit those organizations in a minute, we work over the 15 counties that make the St. Louis MSA. Because a lot of people say, well, are you only working in the city? We do a lot of work in the city because it has an outsized impact on our reputation. It has a lot of our big assets, universities and other things. But we do work in this 15 county area. And the reason why is that's how we show up in the global economy. That's our labor pool, our supply lines locally and everything. That is the asset base that we get up every day to sell. If you look on the left, for those that might have been involved with some of these various organizations, those 5 groups represented the effort that this region was using, the organizing principles, if you will, to work on economic growth issues and public policy issues. The reality was it had become very fragmented, like a lot of things that we need to solve for. But the business community doesn't need a vote of the people. We just needed courage and vision to come together and say, we have got to compete in a different way. And we looked around the country at a lot of the cities people would often tell us about. Well, my kid's talking about Nashville or Columbus or Denver. Well, folks, the reality was when you look in those communities, their business leaders and families and foundations organized in a radically different way than St. Louis. They have built, over the last 20 years in many cases, institutions in their community that have standing like we think of Forest Park or the Symphony or the Zoo. These are real institutions with professional staff, deeply committed stakeholders that are doing the hard work year over year because you shape your economy in decades. And that had proven very, very difficult in St. Louis. So we said we've got to organize differently for success if we're going to have it. At the end of the day, I mean, our product is St. Louis. We want to work every day to improve it, to make us more globally competitive. And you got to get out there and you cannot be the best kept secret and expect to grow. So we're pushing and promoting St. Louis and taking that story globally, as you will see here, in radical new ways. We're also reorganizing this. I'm a lawyer by training. I came out of Bryan Cave. You know, I think in practice areas. St. Louis doesn't need another gala right now. What you need are professionals that can get up every day and that have that core expertise to do real work and create real value and that can show up for you when we've got to go head to head against Nashville or Denver on a deal, that you've got a team that can pick up the ball and know how to pull us together and make that happen every day. And that takes real professional expertise. And I'll tell you, this year alone, I got rid of a lot of folks. I brought in people, I said, I am committed to not hiring former mayor's cousins. We are hiring the very best professionals from across the country. And this year, I have brought in top talent from New York, Boston, Charlotte, New York, San Francisco, and New Orleans. So I am scouring the country, and these people are in some cases uprooting their families because of what the business community has done, and they want to be a part of this as well. So we're building a great team. I mentioned we exist because businesses, foundations, and families are coming together to pool their resources to solve a set of challenges nobody can solve alone. It makes no sense to tackle these big economic issues. I'm really proud of this. This represents a group of companies that are investing 6 or 7 figures annually to build the capacity and to bring Greater St. Louis Inc. to life over the last 24 months. It's not all big businesses. Some of them are a lot smaller, but it's people coming together and saying the time is now, I am in, and if we're going to do it, let's do it. And so we're really, really thankful for that incredible list of our top investors that have come to the table. We're also, St. Louis was, the time we started this, top 20 metro, now 21st, the only one in that subset that hadn't even written down for 10 years. What is the growth strategy? And as you all know from leading businesses, I mean, if you don't even have a plan or set a direction, you're certainly never going to get there. That was just the starting point. But we are in this region now as we enter and fight in this very critical decade, working from a singular agenda with a common set of objectives. And I'm just hitting kind of the top lines here. Really importantly, as part of the merger, a huge philosophical shift in how we think about development. And that is, not only do we need to grow this region, but growth in a good job is actually the best social program we have. So we can use that to bring jobs and investment to places that have been left behind and bring people into the economy. And that's one of the best crime prevention strategies we've got in the region. So we're working on inclusive growth to make sure we really reflect what we need to be in the 21st century. Dave Nicholas is here actually from the Post-Dispatch. Dave, I did not do this because you are here. This is in every slide. But I mean this in all seriousness, not just because he covers my work and I'm trying to influence him here, even though he is giving me a job review in part on Sunday, so stay tuned for Dave's column. I don't know how I'll fare, I hope okay. But one of the things I love and respect about Dave is he's a lot like us. You got to play it down the middle and call it like you see it, and we really trust his judgment. After our first year in operation, what Dave said was the merger is making a difference. And he went through a lot of the points on the board, but also what we're really proud of, and I am going to guard ferociously because it is critical to the way we compete, is that for so long we fought to get this, that the region's business and civic community is finally speaking with one voice. And we have got to have that. Government is a challenge enough. The business community, though, can solve this, and you can get a whole lot done leading in that way. And I do want to thank, as I told Dave this week too, our founding chairman, a uniquely unifying figure in this region, is Andy Taylor. And Andy stepped up and has been absolutely critical to restoring confidence, to leading by example, and bringing people to the table to say, I don't care what size your business is, I don't care how much you're putting in, I want people that are the St. Louis Patriots, because it is now that we have to fix this and we've got to grow. So we're really, really thankful for Andy's leadership on that. So now let's talk about aligning in new ways. We know, folks, for a long time, you all probably said it, you've heard it. We'd hear about big jobs announcements in the paper. Why are they going to Nashville? Why are they going to Indianapolis? Why are they going to Denver? Why aren't they coming from St. Louis? The reality was things had gotten so bad, we actually didn't have a team that was dedicated to taking those calls. So the way this works, right, when people are looking around the country where to site capital investment and jobs, you have to put your best foot forward. You got to bring proposals forward. This is deep, hard professional work. And that had become you may remember when Amazon HQ2 was citing, the Post-Dispatch headline the next day was, who's in charge? The communities that were really competitive, they were already coming out. They knew which civic institution took that accountability and was in charge. That's the single biggest problem we've solved for, is who even takes the darn call. But what I'm really proud of, we put up billions of dollars of wins last year where we had to go head to head with other cities. That's historic. We're put up another over $1 billion of competitive capital investment that we brought into the region. So good, these three headlines represented 1 week in October. And this is a big deal for this region, that in 1 week, over $1 billion of capital investment going head to head with other cities. And I said there were years when I was younger in this line of work in St. Louis, any one of these deals would have been the thing we talked about all year. We had 3 of them in 1 week. St. Louis is getting off its back. We're getting out there and we're competing again. And that's what's represented by these wins, including companies here like James Hardy. We had to beat Texas, Tennessee, and Colorado for that deal. That's a big deal as manufacturing is onshoring back to the country. Those are examples of that. Another one that I like to point out, because people forget, in this line of work, some of the real trophies are what are called a mega project, where you land 1,000 new jobs at one time. Those aren't that common. They're really hard to win. And the reality was, this region had not won one for 20 years. It's an unacceptable level of performance, where it's a real greenfield project. But we're proud, as this merger started, and not even 24 months in, 2 of those on the board for St. Louis already. And you see these deals here, including one that got up to 1,600 jobs and almost $1 billion in capital investment, with the Rosen family bringing their largest facility to this region. And then you see on the tech side as well with Accenture. That's a big deal. And that is evidence that we are putting different points on the board. Another one where this really, really mattered, you may have saw the Stewart family has been deeply involved in the sport of racing, made big investments over at the Worldwide Technology Raceway track. This is a big, big deal. They've worked for the last 10 years, and we can't divorce. This is why these wins take time, building that facility up. But they ultimately got the call from the France family that owns NASCAR and said St. Louis is competitive for what is basically the World Series of racing. And it's a big deal. And if you look at this cover story from the Post-Dispatch, in the second line, when they got that call from the France family, and I didn't ask them to say this, they said, my first call was to Greater St. Louis Inc. Because they said, how do you organize this region when you got one shot and they got what we want to put our best foot forward and get the governors from both states together and say the same thing and all that kind of stuff? That's an example of what we're doing. And why does this matter? One, as we work on inclusive development, this brought a huge catalytic investment to East St. Louis and Madison, Illinois. That's a place we need to be bringing investment if we're going to get to some of these root cause issues. Secondly, as Dave Stewart reminds me, 30 billion global media impressions about St. Louis from this one event. And they're coming back next year. That's the way we need to be showing up. Another one, as many of you know, we became very backward-looking about air service for good reason. We remembered TWA, nonstop air service to Europe, nonstop service to everywhere. And this was one we took very seriously. And we opened up a dialogue. Really, Michael Neidorf was very critical in this conversation, opened up a dialogue with Lufthansa. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we launched this year on June 1st, for the first time in 20 years, restoring nonstop air service from St. Louis to continental Europe on Lufthansa. And I'll just tell you, folks, having been through these negotiations, which were complex and difficult and tense at times, if you would have had 5 different business groups showing up with an international company where we are a speck of dust in their global network and they got what we want, we would have lost. They want to know, who can I negotiate with? Who represents the business community, and how are we going to get a deal done, and what can you deliver? We worked very closely, public-private partnership with Lambert Airport and the public sector, Rodney Krim, the St. Louis Partnership, and at the end of the day, we've got it done. And the flight is doing very well. We're also showing up differently in Jeff City. Jeff City's been a challenge for this region. We're a global, diverse, complex metro area, and at times policy has been difficult. Now, I'll just point out one here that I'm proud of. We're a global center of healthcare. We are a headquarters town for healthcare. We're a major global researcher in healthcare. The reality was, when the politics had gotten so bad, Medicaid expansion, which was authorized under the Affordable Care Act, folks, this is over $1 billion a year. We were leaving in DC because of the politics at the time of Obamacare. Ultimately, and I was in the statewide campaign, had to take it to a vote of the people because the legislature wouldn't authorize it. Missouri voters passed it. The legislature still wouldn't fund it. It's insane. It's completely insane. And this is one where we worked with Thompson Coburn, Brian Cave came together. We put an all-star legal team. We said, that's fine. The business community, we're not lazy anymore. We'll see you in court. Went all the way to the Supreme Court, won an I-No decision, and Medicaid has been funded today. This was really important. If you care about Washington University, St. Louis University, SSM, BJC, and places like that, this is a big, big deal. And as I told our CEOs, this does not need to be political. You want to talk to me about Indianapolis and why it's grown so fast? Happened back in 2016 under Governor Mike Pence. If he can get it done, we can get it done, folks. This does not need to be a right or left issue. It's an economic issue. We talked about Build Back Better. We are in an unprecedented time of federal funding into the economy. The reason for that, which is often less talked about, is largely tied to national security, because you got to restore certain American industries in manufacturing, supply lines, pharma, chips, as we're detangling from China over potential conflicts later this decade. The first real test of that nationally was called the Build Back Better Regional Challenge, and it was considered the proving ground of regions who could get their act together, get organized, and get things done in the post-COVID era. The test was who can build an industry cluster and use that industry cluster to help address racial and social inequities. And you all know what it's like when St. Louis has had to compete for federal funding in the past. We become an internal circular firing squad in the region, and the money goes elsewhere. Greater St. Louis Inc. pulled together this proposal. We said, folks, those days are over. We're going to go in with one proposal, one voice, and we're going to try to win this thing. 529 proposals from around the country. It was narrowed to 60 finalists. We were in those finals. Then the president announced from the White House the 21 winners of this challenge. St. Louis was on that list. Less than 4%. This was like getting into Harvard or Stanford. This is the way the region is competing differently and more effectively. This is all focused on advanced manufacturing, by the way. That's a big macro. Manufacturing jobs are coming back. They're higher paying and more technological. We want every single one of those to come back to this region. We're also, just real quick here, working on downtown. One of the tools that we have is a patient capital real estate fund. So some businesses and families pulled together just shy of $200 million that creates a flexible pool of capital to take on some of the thorniest real estate challenges in the city. Some of those right here, just to show you how that matters. The Butler Brothers building, many of you may know that. It's a big historic building in downtown. It's one of the big 5 vacancies. And let me tell you, we're not going to solve public safety challenges with big vacant buildings everywhere. That's working against us. 800,000 square feet. It's been vacant for 20 years. We use that fund. Rick Holton actually was the one that found a developer out of Memphis, called and said, let's get a deal happen. We use that fund. That building opens as 300 new apartments and new commercial. Perrick's building it, and we're getting that done. And you're seeing some of these other projects. We are not going to sit here and complain. We're going to actually put solutions forward, roll up our sleeves, and get the job done. Same thing on downtown. We're going to continue to be forceful advocates with this administration on the need for investments in public safety infrastructure downtown. The reality is, after all these one-time dollars are gone, downtown is 20% of the city's general revenue. And if downtown does not perform well, it's a brake tap on everybody. I don't care what city you live in this region. If that is the magnet for young people, it is the image of this region to the world, and it's got to be the best it can be. It's been neglected for over a decade. That is a core part of the strategy going forward. And these are some of the wins we're proud of. We actually just recommitted our lease there. Point out here, Scale AI. This is a big project, part of the geospatial. It's going to be up to 500 jobs. Artificial intelligence, geospatial, backed by Peter Thiel. Some of you may know him. And they chose Washington Avenue. Folks, they're bringing young people in from DC and San Francisco. They're loving it. And I felt like the old man in the room at the ribbon cutting at this thing. And they're talking about, I can buy a house here. I love it here. They're young, diverse, educated, and they love what they're seeing in St. Louis. Those are the kinds of deals we're going to keep bringing. So what's next? I mentioned the Build Back Better. The centerpiece of that is we are building what is the Donald Danforth Plant Science Center of Manufacturing up in North City, St. Louis, right next to Rankin. This is a big, big deal. And when you think about it, connecting to a $2 billion headquarters with geospatial up north, Cortex, that is a dense center of urban innovation that is going to propel this region forward. I like to point out geospatial, it's a big deal. The NGA is building that. We are doing for geospatial what a generation of leaders did for plant science, which is say, we've got the assets, let's be the global leader. You know geospatial, if you pick up your phone and do a mapping, or you call an Uber, you are using what is known as geospatial technology. And I put this up here. We were in Denver, actually, at the big global convention of the geospatial industry with Admiral Sharp, who at the time led the NGA. He's from DC. We're in Denver. He wanted to talk about St. Louis. And he said, that's where it's at. It's the Starbucks moment. Get in now. So we're really proud of that. Andy has stepped up to build a research center around geospatial so that we continue to be at the leading edge. I just want to be mindful because I want to give you some time. Immigration and refugees. The men and women in Afghanistan that supported our military, as you know, had to be airlifted out or receive a certain death. This region came together in ways I have never seen. We're up over 1,000 of those refugees choosing to be in St. Louis, and we are built on immigration, legal immigration, and refugees, and everybody had to act fast. This is another example like Build Back Better. The region pulled it together, and we mobilized and actually got it done. And the BBC Global News was holding that out. I'll end here. Another project that has been kicked down the road for far too long civically is rebuilding Lambert Airport. Because of the trust that was built and established through that Lufthansa deal, we're now taking on working with our airport to rebuild Lambert. We're in the bottom 20% of our peers for investment in airport infrastructure. We are not going to keep Fortune 500 headquarters here if you do not have a global connectivity that is best in class. So we announced with Rhonda earlier this year the single terminal plan. We're going to be working very intensively next year to build that capital stack and go after some of those competitive infrastructure dollars in DC. We have to get this done, folks. Politicians will get distracted at times. You all, the business community, civic leaders, we got to think long term, and we do have a really good alignment of political interest, but it's got to get done.